Hello again, and welcome back to An Aesthetic Education. In the heart of what was once East Berlin lies an island of museums. These museums, created to house objects of art, history, and culture, were built mostly in the 19th and early 20th centuries, when Germany was reaching out across the globe and establishing itself in ways that it previously thought impossible. With the world at their fingertips, Germany felt the need to expand and show its intellectual might as a reflection of their new unified country and empire. Archaeology and the owning of antiquities became an obsession within the German-speaking world. Out from Germany came some of the greatest archaeologists ever known, and their excavations brought discoveries and prizes that became the envy of many other countries at the time. The burgeoning capital of Berlin was deemed to be the new home of these archaeological wonders, and one museum in particular became its cultural epicenter. The Pergamon Museum houses three distinct collections: the collection of classical antiquities, the Museum of the Ancient Near East, and the Museum of Islamic Art. Within this vast and impressive collection, there is one singular piece of monumental archaeological importance, which naturally was the piece that gave the museum its name. The Pergamon Altar, a monument created to highlight success and wealth in the kingdom of Pergamon during the Hellenist period, from 281 to 133 BC. Let's take a moment and imagine that we are walking through the halls of the Pergamon Museum. As we walk together, we see rooms filled with artifacts from the ancient world, sculptures, cuneiform tablets, and coins. A narrowing of the hallway leads to a room filled with the blue and gold surroundings of the Ishtar Gate, seemingly inviting us back to the world of ancient Babylon. But finally, we make our way to the room containing the Pergamon altar. And this is what we see. All around us, the bodies rose out of the stone, crowded into groups, intertwined, or shattered into fragments. Hinting at their shapes with a torso, a propped-up arm, a burst hip, a scabbed shard, always in warlike gestures, dodging, rebounding, attacking, shielding themselves. Stretched high or crooked, some of them snuffed out, but with a freestanding, forward-pressing foot, a twisted back, the contour of a calf harnessed into a single common motion. A gigantic wrestling, emerging from the gray wall, recalling a perfection, sinking back into formlessness. A hand, stretching from the rough ground, ready to clutch, attached to the shoulder across empty surface. A barked face with yawning cracks, a wide open mouth, blankly gaping eyes, the face surrounded by the flowing locks of the beard, the tempestuous folds of a garment, everything close to its weathered end and close to its origin. Every detail preserving its expression, brittle fragments from which the whole could be gleaned. Rough stumps next to polished smoothness, enlivened by the play of muscle and sinews, tautly harnessed chargers, rounded shields, erect spears, a head split into a raw oval, outspread wings, a triumphantly raised arm, a leaping heel circled by a fluttering tunic, a clenched fist on a now absent sword, shaggy hounds, their jaws clamped into loins and necks, a falling man, his finger stub aiming at the eye of the beast hanging over him, a charging lion protecting a female warrior, his paws swinging back to strike, hands endowed with bird claws, horns looming from weighty brows, scaly legs coiling, a brood of serpents everywhere, with strangleholds around bellies and throats, darting their tongues, baring sharp teeth, bashing into naked chests. These only just created, already dying faces, these tremendous and dismembered hands, these wide sweeping pinions drowning in the blunt rock. This stony gaze, these lips torn upon for a shriek, this striding, stamping, these blows of heavy weapons, this rolling of armored wheels, these clusters of hurled lightning bolts, this grinding underfoot, this rearing and collapsing, this endless straining to twist upward out of grainy boulders. How gracefully curly the hair, how elaborately gathered and girded the lightweight mantle, how delicate the ornamentation on the straps of the shield, on the bulge of the helmet, how gentle the shimmer of the skin, ready for caresses yet exposed to the relentless rivalry, to slaughter and annihilation. With mask-like countenances, clutching one another, and shoving one another away, strangling one another, clambering over one another, sliding from horses, entangled in the reins, utterly vulnerable in nakedness, and yet enwrapped in Olympic aloofness. Appearing indomitable as an ocean monster, a griffin, a centaur, yet grimacing in pain and despair. Thus they clashed with one another, acting at higher behest, dreaming, motionless in insane vehemence, mute in inaudible roaring, all of them woven into a metamorphosis of torture, shuddering, persisting, waiting for an awakening, in perpetual endurance and perpetual rebellion, in outrageous impact and in extreme exertion to subdue the threat, to provoke the decision. A soft ringing and murmuring resounded now and again. The echoes of footfalls and the voices surrounded us for moments at a time. And then once more, only this battle was near. Our gazes glided over the toes and the sandals, bouncing off the skull of a fallen man, over the dying man, whose stiffening hand lay tenderly on the arm of the goddess who held him by the hair. The cornice was the ground for the warriors. From its narrow, even strip they threw themselves up into the turmoil. The hooves of the horses banged upon the cornice, the hems of the garments grazed it, and the serpentine legs twisted across it. The ground was perforated at only one place, here. The demoness of the earth rose up, her face hacked away under her eye sockets, her breasts massive in a thin covering, a torn-off clump of one hand lifted in a search, the other hand asking for a standstill, loomed from the stone edge, and knotty long-jointed fingers stretched up to the profiled corbel, as if they were still underground and were trying to reach the wrist of the open thumbless female hand. They moved along under the cornice, seeking the blurred traces of incised script. These words from Peter Weiss, in his illuminating and challenging work called The Aesthetics of Resistance, capture in a most singular and impressive way the grandeur and the impact of seeing the Pergamon Altar. From Weiss's description, we gain a sense of one of the most important characteristics of Hellenist art, the focus and inclusion of emotional expressiveness. For the expression of the emotions of battle is at the heart of the Pergamon Altar, with its most famous feature, a monumental frieze depicting the Gigantomachy, the prehistoric battle between the gods and the giants for the supremacy of the world. Upon first inspection, the frieze clearly portrays ideological overtones that were common in Greek art at the time, the need for power and the need for control over disruptive forces. Pergamon was the capital of the Attalid kings, and for much of its history, the Attalids paid tribute to the Galatians, the tribes of Gaul. In the year 241 BC, Attalus I refused to pay tribute any longer, and in response fought a battle and conquered one of the Galatian tribes. This marked a turning point, as the Attalids were no longer subservient rulers, but masters of their own fate. Naturally, this new status and belief in their own importance and superiority impacted the patronage and public works that the Attalids made in Pergamon. Since Pergamon had adopted Greek civic organization, the Attalids were able to maintain control of the city through their right to appoint the chief magistrates. The political organization and structure of Pergamon is important to understand, as the machinations of power and money dictated the creation of art. As Richard Whitaker notes in his article on the Pergamon Altar, saying, Attalus, by inserting his own victory into this series of famous triumphs over the mythological and historical other, quite clearly sought to represent Pergamon as a second Athens, as a bastion of civilization against the barbarian onslaught. The monument also clearly shows us the historical and political meaning that the Attalids attached to the subject of Gigantomachy, obviously a vital clue to the interpretation of the frieze on the altar. The Pergamon treatment of gigantomachy is by far the most extensive example that survived the intervening centuries. The overlapping figures of the gods subduing the giants is placed perfectly to impress and overwhelm the viewers. The giants, placed in a dramatic full frontal or rear view, create a more natural perspective with the purpose of placing the viewer front and center to the conflict. The gods, occupying a higher position on the frieze, display their superiority to the barbaric giants, heightening the tension between civilization and barbarism. This lower position cements the vision of the giants as being decisively defeated by the gods, whittling away any sense of grandeur of their place within the universe, and providing an absolute sense of inferiority in comparison to the victorious gods. The Pergamon altar is filled with minute and purposeful symbols, all relating to that sense of purpose around a time of power and victory. One could spend hours marking every god, animal, giant, and other creature or symbol on the frieze itself, and trying to decipher the significance of its placement. These details would show the complex and stirring narrative created by the Attalids in the name of their vision for Pergamon. Yet it can also be striking to see this vast, expressive creation as a kind of obsession with self-reflection. For how else could the constant retelling of the gigantomachy, the overt drawing of equivalency between the achievements of the gods in battle against the giants and the success of the Pergamons against the tribes of Gaul, be seen in any other way? The Pergamon altar stands at a unique crosspoint, as it is both a vital piece of archaeological preservation and a work of art that can speak to us through the millennia, joining our present day with the idea, skills, and beauty that meant something to the people of the past. You see, all art that contains an element of aesthetic beauty, no matter the dogma, no matter the politics of the time, speaks to some sort of truth. The Pergamon altar highlights this dichotomy that exists between art and the era in which we live. Yes, it is a reflection on royal power, how the Attalids wanted to be seen and most importantly remembered, how at the height of their power and in the spring of their youth, they reached out across time and compared themselves to gods who fought back against the barbarism of their age in the name of order and civilization. Yet this altar of Pergamon, this altar of Zeus, which praises the battle, the conquest, and the subjugation of the disorder of the universe, those praises are hollow, for they belong to an era long since past, and praise gods who do not reflect the value of the work of art, the skill, the craftsmanship that went into the creation of this beautiful piece. You see, we don't feel the politics of this creation. We can't. They're not the issues of our time. We can find similarities of experience, of ideas, and understanding, but it will never be like for like, in both appreciation or recognition. Which is why art that is made in the name of politics or ideology never retains its beauty or truth, as the political dogma might have intended. Instead, we are left with the simple truth found within the ruins and relics of a time long past, that the God who is praised today, when we look upon that altar of beauty, is the only God that is recognized when it comes to the arts, the God of memory. Here, at the end of our journey around the Pergamon altar, let me leave you with the words once again of Peter Weiss, who summarizes this understanding far better than any other individual possibly could. We debated whether one therefore had the right, after all, to claim exclusivity in order to impose a guideline on art, and whether stipulating a specific function in that way might elicit a conviction, a consequence. Yet a style could not be inflicted on anyone. It had to grow organically. It was intrinsic to the period we lived in that the entire past, which we were the first to get to know in its full scope, was plunging into a melting pot. The style of our era had to be a continuous seeking and rejecting. And how was it possible for earlier artists to produce things of lasting value while working under tyrants? They could do so because they did not see the extent of suppression, did not challenge the power structure. They stated what they considered to be true. The enlightened artist today who makes himself available to the dictatorship can only toady and fool himself. The monuments of fascism, based on Greek, on Roman models, communicate nothing but plaster emptiness. That is why the advocates of truth live in exile or captivity, or if they dare to express their opinions to the rulers, they have to pay for their openness with their lives. Prison and torture, a ban on one's working, escape, banishment, and auto-da-fe became a part of the artist's lot ever since he started repudiating the powers that be. All art, all literature, are present inside ourselves, under the aegis of the only deity we can believe in, Nemesis. She, the mother of the arts, is named Memory. She protects what our knowledge contains in all achievements. She whispers to us, telling us what we yearn for. Any man who presumes to cultivate, to castigate these stored assets is attacking us, ourselves, and condemning our powers of discernment. Sometimes I am repelled by art historians who, while raising an index finger, forget all about the multivalence of every single work. But those who apply restraints based on political considerations know nothing about the essence of art. By smashing images, burning books, fighting against disagreeable views, they present themselves as members of the Inquisition. Ideology bluntly barges into a field with which it could be linked, but which must turn a deaf ear when ideology demands subordination. If you enjoyed this show, please give us a follow on your preferred podcast listening platform, as well as on Instagram or Facebook, where you can find us under altalena.art. A transcript of this week's podcast can be found on our website, altalena.art/aesthetic education. Thank you very much for listening, and we look forward to welcoming you back very soon.